Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. When Captain Thomas Mantell's P-51 fighter plane dropped out of the sky on the 7th of January, 1948, it created a UFO controversy that remains unsolved to this day. Did Mantell die at the hands of an alien astronaut, or was he, as the Air Force contends, mistakenly chasing the planet Venus or a weather balloon? Well, now, for the first time in nearly a half-century, key players in the Mantell mystery are about to talk.
No one's ever going to convince me I didn't see it, because there were too many of us that did.
At that time, it was general procedure that nobody talk about UFOs.
On January 7th, 1948, high above the bluegrass pastures of rural Kentucky, National Guard Captain Thomas Mantell Jr. saw a UFO that he considered to be a serious threat to the security of the United States. Tower controllers at Godman Field, Fort Knox, saw it too and allowed Mantell to pursue the UFO. A decorated war hero, he had survived anti-aircraft fire in World War II, but Tommy Mantell would not return from this encounter. According to the original Air Force investigation of the crash, Mantell died not in pursuit of a UFO, but while mistakenly chasing the planet Venus. But now, nearly 50 years later, eyewitnesses to Mantell's death are speaking out publicly for the first time, and they have a very different story to tell.
They described the object as being very large, metallic, round metallic object.
Pilot Herb Kipp distinctly remembers hearing the term UFO to describe the object that would take Mantell's life.
In 1948, I was a control tower operator at Stanford Field. We got a phone call from Godwin Tower, and he asked if we had any P-51s in the area, and I said, "Why, what's the problem?" He said, "We have a UFO hovering over our airport." And I thought somebody was playing a joke on me or something, and I kind of snickered a little bit. And this other voice came on and said, "This is Colonel so-and-so, and I'm the base commander. And Mr. Kipp, this is no drill. This thing is hovering right over the airport."
Along with the base commander in the tower at Godman Field that day was Base Intelligence Officer Captain James Dusler.
The UFO was in the air for 4 hours, and it didn't move, it just stayed there. We were looking at something and didn't know what in the world we were looking at.
At the time of the sighting, Captain Mantell was leading a squadron of P-51s for the Kentucky National Guard. Over Godman Field, there was no longer anything routine about this mission.
Mantell was requested to pursue this unidentified flying object.
A retired Air Force Reserve captain, Tabor has researched the Mantell case for 15 years.
One of the pilots in the flight, Al Clements, said to him, "Tommy, you don't have any air, you can't do this." Mantell replied back, "Al, don't worry about it, it's not a problem." They continue on up. Clements finally caught onto it himself. He described it as a large, glowing object.
He said, "My 2 wingmen are coming in. We want hot guns, and we want them now."
According to air traffic controller Quentin Blackwell, Mantell ordered the other planes back to load on live ammunition while he continued to climb toward the UFO. Only this man is still alive to describe what happened next. He is telling his story for the first time since 1948.
The day of the Mantell crash, I was 6 years old. My mother was taking clothes in off the line. She'd been watching a bright light in the sky. We heard a loud plane, and we saw this fighter plane coming in below the bright light. Got pretty close to it, and all of a sudden went straight up at it. And then when he got all the way to it, he leveled off and flew away from it to the west.
Mantell's plane smashed into the ground, going in excess of Mach 1. Captain Dusler was among the first investigators on the scene. As a seasoned intelligence officer, Dusler had been at many crash sites before, but this one was extraordinary and deeply disturbing.
There wasn't a drop of blood anyplace. And I talked to one of the coroner people. It was odd because there was no blood. Odd because there was no fire. I don't ever recall seeing a crash like that, or as serious as that, that didn't have a fire. I never saw his body because the coroner had taken it away.
No one at the funeral home saw the body. It was in a black leather bag, and then it was sealed inside a lead coffin. The body was buried on the 10th of January, 1948, 3 days after the accident. Certainly a closed coffin funeral. But again, we have a question. Was there even a body in that black leather bag? No one saw the remains.
Despite official denials, there is ample evidence that the Air Force sent a special UFO investigative team from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio to the Mantell crash site. Sightings has obtained memos indicating that Colonel H.M. McCoy, Chief of Air Force Intelligence at Wright-Pat, and his investigator, Al Loading, were attempting to gather information on the flying disc Mantell was chasing. One memo contains a transcription of Loading's request for information about Captain Dusler.
He was the only man assigned to, as he called it, Saucer Project. He had file case after file case after file case filled with reports.
One of the keys to solving this case comes from finding out more information about the Air Force intelligence team that was sent to investigate this incident. Who is Mr./Dr. Loading?
One of the intriguing operatives in the early Project Sign, which had to do with UFO investigations, was a civilian engineer employed at Wright-Patterson named Alfred Ludding. Alfred Ludding was originally part of T3 engineering design, but he was assigned very early in the game, in July of 1947, to work on flying discs for the intelligence group.
Michael Swords is a natural sciences professor at Western Michigan University and is the editor of the highly regarded Journal of UFO Studies. He has uncovered an intriguing link between Wright-Patterson, the mysterious Mr. Loading, and real-life flying saucers.
Al Ludding, for reasons that we don't know, early in July of 1947, designed a flying disc-shaped craft, which, although he was not allowed to patent it at that time, ultimately got a patent for in the early 1950s.
In 1952, Alfred C. Loading was granted a U.S. patent for this low aspect ratio aircraft design. The craft's flying saucer shape raises many intriguing questions. Was Loading's design a flight of fancy? Or was he inspired by something he had actually seen during his tenure in Air Force intelligence?
If we can answer these questions, if we can find out their background, then we can have a little bit more information that could answer as to whether this was an extraterrestrial vehicle.
But the solution to the Mantell mystery is unlikely to come from the one source that probably knows the truth. The Air Force explanation that Mantell died from anoxia, lack of oxygen, while chasing Venus, is contradicted even in their earlier report, recently obtained by Sightings. In this memo, written just after the crash and dated a decade earlier than the official report, Venus is ruled out as the UFO Mantell died for in the sky above his Kentucky home.
The Mantell case is important for many reasons, including one that not many people know about. It was the Mantell case that launched the career of the grandfather of ufology. J. Allen Hynek, the originator of the term close encounters, was a little-known astronomy professor at Ohio State University when he was called in by the Air Force to consult on the Mantell case. And the rest, as they say, is history.